The fact that so many books still name the Beatles as the greatest or most significant or most influential rock band ever only tells you how far rock music still is from becoming a serious art. Jazz critics have long recognized that the greatest jazz musicians of all time are Duke Ellington and John Coltrane, who are not the most famous or richest or best sellers of their times, let alone of all times. Classical critics rank the highly controversial Beethoven over classical musicians who were highly popular in courts around Europe.
Rock critics, instead, are still blinded by commercial success. The Beatles sold more than anyone else. Not true, by the way. Therefore, they must have been the greatest. Jazz critics grow up listening to a lot of jazz music of the past. Classical critics grow up listening to a lot of classical music of the past. Rock critics are often totally ignorant of the rock music of the past. They barely know the best sellers.
This is Music Sucks.
And I Want to Die. Welcome to our first biography episode, I think.
Oh, God, is this really our first one?
I know. We really chose a weird-ass first biography episode. We're not actually doing it on a musician, which I find interesting.
We are not.
We're doing it on a music critic, I guess. Yeah, he's a critic.
A worldly man, I will call him.
Yes, he's a worldly man.
He is a man of ideas.
Yes, he's a thinker.
He is a thinker.
Whatever that means after
He's
this
a mathematician.
Yeah.
He's someone who dabbles in AI.
Yep. A futurist?
Yes, he talks at colleges. Mm-hmm. He lives in Silicon Valley now.
Does he really?
And he runs the longest running music criticism website of all time, I believe.
That is impressive and embarrassing at the same time.
It is. We are, of course, talking about Piero Scaruffi, or however you say his name.
That's pretty much it, I'm sure.
Okay.
No, so Piero Scaruffi is, as we mentioned, the longest running music critic on the internet. He has a lot of opinions that are, I would say, are well thought out and like well informed, but can also go into the dark areas of idiocy and.
He is a controversial figure.
Yes,
we will say that.
And there's in a lot of ways we'll get into all that fun stuff, but yeah, he's a controversial figure. He's got controversial opinions, but even his like bad opinions are better than most music journalism, I would say.
I would agree, and that's something we will delve into. Mm-hmm. But let's start. A little background on Piero.
All right, what do you got for me?
So it's funny reading his Wikipedia biography versus his own website biography. I should say autobiography in this case.
Yep.
So they're pretty similar. The tone is quite different. Basically, born in Italy, he is an American citizen now. Lives in Silicon Valley, California. He majored in mathematics.
Cool.
And went on to work in artificial intelligence. So he's visited at Harvard, Stanford, done a lot of history of knowledge, just philosophy melded with technology kind of talk, things like that. And at some point in, well, it was probably the year here somewhere, in the early days of the internet, he started an e-zine where he would review art.
Those were a thing, weren't they?
I know, right? Yeah,
Okay.
you just get in your email.
Ooh.
He'd review art and science and things like that. That ended up growing into a database about his reviews about music until it turned into his website, Scaruffi.com.
Yep.
To this day, he has, I don't even know how many reviews on his website, and not even just music. Like, this guy talks about everything. And it's probably one of the most comprehensive music databases online.
Yeah, at least as far as we're concerned of like, I guess, totality of genre representation. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not like the most extensive in terms of like huge collection of like the most popular artists and everything. Like, it doesn't have all fucking 29 Eagles albums reviewed or whatever.
It might.
It might.
He actually, that might be on there, dude.
Oh God.
Well, he goes pretty deep.
I guess I haven't gone super deep on Piero, but like, it was my impression that he covers like. Well, more outside the mainstream.
No, not true. Because, okay, so here's where we get into his own version of the biography, which my favorite part about is he talks about all the awards and things he's won, but with no references to them whatsoever. And I've looked on his site and I can't find it, and it might be there, but I was looking for a like list of awards and accolades kind of thing. And I don't see it anywhere. And it's always something like, you know, let's see, he's published a number of books as well as hundreds of articles and like received awards for numerous awards for them and things like this where you're like,
can I get some info on that, please?
He co-wrote a massive history of Silicon Valley that was later translated in Chinese and voted 7th most influential book of the year.
By who?
By who?
By what?
By what?
Is this like the New York Times or like
I don't know.
or like the buttfuck Arizona?
His whole biography is full of stuff like that. He says he writes award-winning poetry. Like, it's one of those things where it's like, again, and also this is mostly translated from Italian. And I don't know if this is some sort of like translation thing or he's just kind of like, I want all this shit. I don't really care. I just want to like put it out there. Or he's just a crazy person. I'm not sure. I can't figure it out,
I know.
honestly.
And you will never be able to, man. He's an interesting character because it could be both. He could have won all these awards, I guess. And it's very plausible that he could also just be completely pulling awards out of his ass. It could be. Both theories are very possible.
He doesn't say.
Yeah.
But I wanted to bring up because you mentioned like not reviewing all the Eagles albums. So he mentions how he has numerous books published. They all happen to be on his own publishing company. And according to him, he has sold like 2,000 copies of one of these books, which is a history of popular music, a history of rock and dance music.
Okay.
And so this is mostly what you find on his website if you look up an album and an artist, is he doesn't necessarily review, especially in the classic rock era, doesn't necessarily review each album that much unless it's something he likes, but he does write like a paragraph or two about each album in sort of like a history of that artist.
Okay.
So I would imagine he probably did review every Eagles album.
Oh, God.
Granted, maybe didn't go in depth in all of them.
Yeah, and I guess that's more what I mean too, is because when you look up something like a Morphine album on his website, he'll have a good 6 or 7 paragraphs devoted to each one of them. And I looked up a couple of the more popular artists in preparing, and they were quite a bit of the time more generalized, more historical.
Yes.
So maybe this is why I was
He
seeing all
still
that.
gives the number to every album, though.
Oh, yes.
His famous
okay.
out of 10 ranking that no one gets a 10 of.
No one out of just like rock though, right?
Oh, I think one jazz album has a 10.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's Mingus, Black Saint, and the Sinner Lady.
Yeah.
I believe. Anyway, so this man, this weird man, who is a mathematician and a scientist, I guess his end goal was to sort of combine science and artificial intelligence with art and film and music and literature.
And it's actually not the only person in the music industry to kind of do that thing. There's like other futurists. It's kind of a weird little sect.
It is.
There's a synthesizer guy named Ray Kurzweil. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, Ray Kurzweil is the same deal. He's like a fucking futurist, artificial intelligence guy. Like it's really weird. There's like this little tiny sect in the music industry for these people. And I kind of want to learn more.
Autism.
I don't want to go there, but like, dude, like Scaruffi and Ray Kurzweil are weird.
They are weird. So
cool.
I want to talk about his website a little bit before we really get into this.
All right.
First of all, it's one of the worst looking websites of all time.
Straight out of the early 90s.
And he's proud of it.
Yeah.
He wrote a response about how he's like, I like the bright colors and I like how simple it is. And you know what? I don't disagree with him.
I mean, I'll defend the simplicity all day. I don't actually think it's that simple. I think it's poorly laid out in its simplicity.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
But bright colors, I mean, I'll say no, but I don't really care.
Well, I mean, I think really what it comes down to, people are just like, I want to see like, pictures and shit like that.
Yeah.
And there's none of that. It's literally this guy just like typing on a page.
Yeah.
And like, there you go. That's the fucking article.
Yeah.
And I kind of like it.
No, I mean, for me, it totally works for me. And it's also partially based on like the kind of thing he gives you. He's not giving you flashy, I guess really, he's not trying to be super controversial with things.
Exactly.
He's stating his facts he's stating his ideas in kind of a logical way. They don't need like 16 pictures. They don't need a Photoshop version of like Mick Jagger on Madonna's head or you know what I mean?
What?
I mean, not that I've seen that.
I only really bring it up because that's something I see when a lot of people criticize him, is they're like, oh, and also his website looks like shit. And it's like, it does, but
who gives a fuck?
I think it's also intentional in a way.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely
Which doesn't
intentional.
make it good, but
definitely
it's,
intentional.
yeah. But just like, if you go on his website, he has, for his table of contents, he has music, which is by far the biggest part of his website. Mm-hmm. But then he has cinema, travel, politics, history. Under history, he has dictators, genocides, literature, science, art, philosophy, technology, and tributes. So somehow this man actually knows about all these things, apparently. I don't obviously have not gone into all the other things. I know he's smart, obviously.
Yeah.
And his music one seems to be the biggest. Mm-hmm. I don't know what his film and literature one is like.
Well, that's kind of a thing, though, is when you're kind of like an academic, again, because he is clearly like a smart person of some sort. Mm-hmm. And honestly, you probably learn fast enough at that point where you're above you're able to absorb more information because you've absorbed it from in different areas. So you kind of understand the learning process. So I could kind of see how he has like a slightly better opinion than like some random asshole who also has an internet site.
I think that
in
makes
all those
sense,
areas.
yeah. And I think we'll get into that too when we talk about his actual reviews, because he does have this sort of unique vibe of being someone who seems to know a lot, but then also isn't like musically educated.
Yeah, it's funny, but like to me it comes off as a valid perspective, and we'll get there.
Yeah, I think so too. But that's what I'm kind of assuming all his other reviews are like.
And I do think like I took a brief journey into his cinema page, and I don't actually know anything about cinema, but like it came off like not quite as strong to me, but I couldn't really tell you that. But that was just my opinion.
It seems like he spent most of his effort into the music section.
Yeah, and well, clearly there's like enormous fucking.
He mentioned in a New York Times article, someone actually wrote an article about him in the New York Times, that he spends about $2,000 a year on music, which I guess isn't that much in the scheme of things.
Well, it's about 2,000 more than I spend on music.
He hasn't even heard of the pirate.
Actually,
the music he reviews isn't on the Pirate Bay.
That's right. That's a good point. He actually has to buy these albums. I've had to buy these albums.
He does. And apparently he's usually, well, and this was like 2005 or something, this article came out.
Right.
Apparently he's usually 200 CDs behind.
Jesus.
He's got that much of a backlog. So it's interesting. He'll do his like best of, 2008 list or whatever. And that will constantly change as he goes through the music. So I'll put it out at the end of 2008, and then if you go back in a couple of years, it might be totally different.
Yep.
Which is kind of weird. And the last thing I want to pull up about him and his website is he actually wrote an article about why his website is better than other. Well, they didn't say better, but it seems like that.
Yeah.
It's titled "What is Unique About This Music Database." Just a bullet point. It provides a truly independent opinion, which I do respect. He is the only person who writes on this website.
Yep.
It's not like Rolling Stone or whatever, where you got like 5-10 different people.
Yeah.
It is not a trick to sell you music.
That's true.
That is true.
Okay, so I use AdBlock all the time. I've never seen an ad on his page on any device I've been on. I don't think he's ever listed an ad for like anything, really.
Honestly, his way he writes about music is so weird. Like, even if he likes it, it doesn't really make me want to listen to it sometimes anyway.
That's true. But like, he's clearly not in this for a profit. He's doing this as a passion project. He's doing it because he wants to put his voice out there, which are all great things.
Now we get into the weirdness. It is written by someone who is relatively competent and unbiased. Sure.
Yeah.
I have been writing for more than 30 years. I am the author of 12 books on music. Again, these books you wrote and published yourself.
Yeah.
They're not
somewhat Neil Breen-esque.
Yes. Yeah. That was good comparison. Yes. It does not provide catchphrases that music labels can use in their marketing campaigns. No shit. He writes super weird.
We'll get into all that, yeah.
It is written by only one person, thus the very unimaginative domain name.
Whatever, yeah.
Basically the same thing. It exists since the World Wide Web was born.
We did touch on that, yeah.
It does not require the latest version of this or that browser.
That is partially why it's so simplistic.
That is true. Design. Yeah, that is true.
There's no like HTML5 taggings. There's like nothing awesome.
Last but not least, it is meant to download fast.
Yeah, because there's nothing on it, dude. Yep. It's fucking.
And then he actually
text.
has another 9, another number after that.
Oh, sweet.
And it goes, yes, I like colors. No, there is no color code. I like bright colors because they keep readers awake when they read my texts.
I notice how much people like that kind of shit when they want dark mode on everything. Okay, so Scaruffi really has a strong sense of identity. We can gather that very clearly. And he has a strong sense of identity because, like, he does have a big brain. I'm just gonna say that.
I think so. Does not necessarily mean his opinion is better than someone else's.
No, and we talked about that last episode.
We did.
Although I'm more inclined to trust his opinion than anyone who writes for the Rolling Stone. If Rolling Stone or fucking Pitchfork, I go to his opinion first.
He, when I was going back reading like a lot of his reviews and listening to music too, as I was reading them, what really gets me about him, I think, is how much context plays a role in his reviews.
Yeah.
And I think that's mostly because, like you said, he is very smart, but he's not musically educated in that sense. He probably doesn't know the terms of vocabulary or couldn't, like, he might be able to hear these things, but I don't think he could, like, describe them.
No, he couldn't put them into a language.
Yeah, I don't think he plays an instrument. But he is so good at listening to this stuff and figuring out what they were doing at that time, how it related to everything before and after it, and what was going on during it. And like, honestly, I don't know anyone that can do it like he does. It's kind of unreal.
And I'm glad we're saying this, because that to me is one of the most important things. Because you can't just.
I agree.
And again, we did talk about this last episode again, but you cannot judge something outside of the context it was released in. It's like trying to compare like fucking. Tiger Woods to like some golfer 50 years before him. It's a different game. There's different access to materials. There's like different culture, whatever, It's like comparing a whole like different political ideas from 200 years before. Why the fuck would you ever do it?
If we look at like some of those reviews we read about like 5 Seconds of Summer's album, and like, obviously those were just shit reviews anyway.
Yeah.
But the way they talked was like, this was like the first time any of this has ever been done. Or
dude.
like it wasn't like just a shitty, like unimaginative pop band. Like, I doubt Scaruffi would review their album, although we can check.
That'd be interesting, actually.
But, like, what could he possibly say, given the context of, like, rock and pop before that? There's nothing in that.
There's nothing interesting about what they did.
Yeah, exactly.
The most interesting has to probably do with the pandemic.
Yes, actually, and that has nothing to do with the music whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the reviews did mention that, which I guess is cool. I mean, to me, it makes me not care in the slightest that it was released at the beginning of the pandemic, because they've been working on it for 2 years anyway.
Yep.
So it was just almost like, actually, in a way, it almost feels opportunistic and cheap to me, but that could just be me reading in too much. They just wanted to release their album, found another way to leverage extra marketing.
Exactly.
Which is annoying, but I guess it's not bad for me. Point is, Scaruffi like delves deep into context, which as a critic is really important, at least in my opinion.
And I don't want to, also, I would say, it's not like he just talks about the context. He also like he actually can describe music pretty well in like layman's terms.
Yeah.
Like much better than most people can.
Yeah.
And it's weird. It's like I don't necessarily miss him describing like, oh, this chord progression or this kind of thing. I mean, obviously that doesn't really work well in his kind of style anyway, but he can talk about a song, and I sort of I can get the song from what he's talking about without really like needing the description of of the musical details.
Yes. And then I'm going to hijack off that to go back to the 5 Seconds of Summer album reviews, and like the reviews of each track were so vapid and inconsequential, like pieces of little data that make no sense and do not give me a clear picture of what it sounds like. I think for one of the songs they mentioned it was like very grungy.
Yeah,
and
your favorite one.
That is my favorite off that album. But they called it grungy.
Yes.
The song Teeth. But like it has no grunge aspects whatsoever. It's not hard hitting. It's not like distorted. It doesn't have any drive.
No, there's nothing.
There's
grunge
nothing.
about
It's
it.
fucking modern ultra pop, right?
Exactly.
I don't get it.
Yep.
So the point is, Scaruffi puts things in a better way than I would say the more famous art publishing companies do.
Literally anyone. Honestly, like I don't know anyone who reviews it better.
Yeah.
In the sense of anyone being able to read it than Scaruffi does.
Right.
Yeah. And, I don't think he should go into details about the music because A, most people don't really know about that. And B, in the sense of how he's describing music, I don't think it really adds anything.
We won't get any extra information out of it.
It will, but he at least has a good enough ear that like his opinion is usually something that I like.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think it's honestly probably because of the hours he's put into it. I mean, he might have put more time into listening to music than like I have.
Oh, I
mean, he's ancient, so probably.
Well, he's spending $2,000 a year on CDs.
Yeah, that's true. So he's probably listened to way more music than I will in the next 20 years, right?
Yeah.
So like the amount of time he sunk, and he's probably fairly litigious in the way he goes about like trying to analyze it. I'm sure he's got like a process in his brain.
I would say so, at least in the older stuff. I mean, I don't remember what year his rock music book came out, and I think if you look through his like more modern stuff, it's not as much has been written about it unless it's someone he really likes. And that's totally fair. It's like I wouldn't want to waste my time at this point on some band that I was like, it's okay. I'll give it like a 6 out of 10 or something.
Yeah.
I don't really feel the need to write about that.
And that's actually something interesting as well as his numbering system.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about his review style a little bit. Okay. So first of all, if you haven't figured it out yet, this man has very avant-garde, weird taste in rock music.
Yeah, he can go a little far out.
And I think for this episode, we shouldn't really talk about jazz and classical at all.
Sure, let's just
talk
focus
about
on
his
the rock. But let's just say that those eccentricities can carry over into those genres as well.
Yes, they can. And we'll talk about his like top 5 list in a minute here, but most of what you're going to find as far as his highest rated music is music you probably have never heard of before.
Yep. I mean, that goes for me. I had to do some Scaruffi education.
I learned so much from this man.
Yeah.
But yes, it's music that obviously existed, and like I guess I don't know if he had like a group of people he was with that he was finding music, or he just literally went out and just like found all these albums somehow, or
I
just
honestly
followed
think it's
liner
that.
notes. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know what kind of circle of friends he has. I'm not sure he has friends, but like it's hard to imagine this coming about from a circle of friends, if that makes sense.
Yes, unless they're all like him, but
Dude, no
way.
fucking way.
So this man has found like so many albums that I don't know if anyone else really knew existed after a certain point, and a lot of them are really cool, and obviously had not really a big impact when they were released, especially the 60s, 70s stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think anyone was listening to this stuff.
Yeah, it's especially back then because you don't have the internet.
And honestly, he's found, like, he has let these people find a new audience through his website. Like, I know, like, you and I and a lot of other, like, music nerds go on his website and just try albums out.
Yep. And that's really rare for me to do. I don't do that when I read Pitchfork. Mm-hmm. I don't do that when I watch like Needle Drop. Is that guy's name?
You don't watch it.
Yeah, I mean, I watched 2 episodes. All right, I watched 2 episodes to just see what that was about. That was a fucking disaster.
But yeah, he's definitely got really out there taste. He does still review all the mainstream albums. Like if you go through his 70s rating, you're gonna find like every band that was popular then. We're not going to get into the Beatles right now, but like Led Zeppelin, for instance, I think he only has like 1 or 2 on his top of our best of the year list or something like that. So he's definitely not like Rolling Stone kind of person, but it's not like he totally ignores it. He actually listens to everything.
Yeah.
Although this is a little weird that he puts everything under the rock umbrella.
That's something that I both agree and disagree with at the same time. It's very strange. So genre labeling is notoriously difficult, right? And under the subject of context, like maybe that's the appropriate way to do it, because it's a lot of these releases that are under this rock umbrella are released the same way rock albums were in like the 60s and 70s. True. So I don't really know. I would personally not label them this way, but when you don't do that.
Wouldn't. But I get where he's coming from, that old school. It's like rock, jazz, and classical.
Yes.
And rock also means pop.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that anymore. But
yeah, because rock is not pop anymore.
And there's no rock anyway. But
what about like My Chemical Romance, dude?
Dude, those are like from 20 years ago.
Oh my god, that's true. What about like
yeah,
what about that grunge band, 5 Seconds of Summer? Woo! Oh my god. Yeah, so there's no rock. You're right, not really. Fall Out Boy.
But he means rock, pop, folk, I guess.
Yeah.
Is kind of what it all comes down to. So that's kind of interesting, and that I think is why some of these albums tend to be higher up than like say Led Zeppelin. It's because he's not necessarily being like, okay, well, like this person's more interesting than Led Zeppelin, but he's not making like blues rock.
Yeah,
right?
They're not really related.
Yeah, but to him, it's all kind of on the same spectrum, which I find pretty interesting. Yeah, actually.
And also, I just want to briefly point out, there's not a lot of, again, because he's old and he's white. There's not a lot of hip hop, rap.
Oh, I want to talk about that.
All right.
We're going to have a whole controversies part.
Okay, never mind. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
But yes, you're correct. Yeah. There is not a lot of that.
Okay, I'm excited for what that's going to bring.
Boy, but yes, also, so you mentioned earlier his numbering system.
Yes.
Wacky.
You
wouldn't think it'd be. It's 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
10.
Although, I mean, there's something to be said about rating things out of 10. In America, it's usually associated with like the grading system in schools, which means anything below like even 7 is like pretty much lambasted, right?
Yep.
So I kind of respect his thing more than like a traditional, I don't think Pitchfork or Rolling Stone review out of 10.
What is Pitchfork does 10?
Pitchfork does 10?
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
Okay, so, and when Pitchfork does things out of 10, usually they're 8+, I will say. Mm-hmm. Most things that review out of 10 do that kind of thing. That's, sorry, Stravinsky. Yeah, so I would say Scaruffi's numbering system is more fun for me to read.
Well, I think it allows him to review a lot more music.
Right.
Because, again, that's the thing. It's like if you look at Pitchfork or Rolling Stone, and these are kind of on opposite spectrums in the whole rock sense of that. Rolling Stone's kind of looking at the dad rock level, and Pitchfork's looking at the indie crap shit. And Scaruffi's trying to do like all of it at the same time. So you end up with like, if you're like best albums of 1977, there's like 200 fucking albums on there. And so obviously not all of those are going to be great, but if his rating system, like if 6 is still like a pretty fucking good album, like
even 5 is decent.
Yeah. He occasionally will put like a 4 out of 10 on his like rating system.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. I don't know what the thought process is behind that.
Interesting.
But yeah, so really basically no rock album has ever gotten a 10 out of 10.
Yeah, and that's his like his almost his motto, right? Like he says that on his website.
He
like,
believes rock can never be that good.
Yes, and that's what's interesting because like I don't get a lot of sense that someone like him can't really compare across the rock and classical and jazz.
Exactly.
So I don't get why he says that because rock should be just as separate.
In his opinion, it's
like less of an art form.
It's less of an art form, essentially.
And I can't.
That is reflected on his top albums.
Yes, it is. And I can't really agree with that assessment.
No, but we are coming from a totally different perspective, essentially.
Yeah.
Than typical rock critics. So yes, 10 out of 10 doesn't happen. 9 out of 10, I think there's like 2 or 3.
There's 3.
I was trying to look it up real quick.
I'll pull it up. Yeah.
I look at his top list, but he's not numbering it anymore.
Oh, cool. What a guy.
Yeah, there's a way to look it up. Whatever. There's like a few. There's a handful tops.
Yeah.
8 out of 10, 7 out of 10. So 8 out of 10 for him is generally like a Rolling Stone 10 out of 10.
Right.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
7 out of, so it's like 8, 7 is like a 9. It's kind of around there. And then, like I said, 6 means it's a good album. 5 and 4 he will occasionally put up if it's like, this ain't great, but it's like good enough. Things like that. I don't think he ever gives 3s he does give 3s or 2s. He just doesn't really write about them.
Yeah.
So yes, like I was saying, I think it allows him to review a lot more stuff and be, like I said before, a more comprehensive list of music that's happening. And I do appreciate that, especially because it's all under rock and he does it by year. And so you really get the whole like range of what the fuck was happening in a year because it's not something that people bring up a lot.
And it's harder to find in eras like the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
Because, if you're not on a major label back then, you're not going to get a lot of press or reviews or a lot of play. So it's nice to have someone like come out and give new life to that music.
Exactly.
Even if it's fucking awful, right?
Right. Well, I mean, it's like, it's like what was, Led Zeppelin doing in the late 70s and what was Brian Eno doing in the late 70s. And that's not something that people like talk about a lot, but at the same time, they were making music. And in our heads, it's kind of separated, at least for me. If I think back, like they were doing this and was doing that, but it's like, they probably crossed paths a lot. They at least knew a lot of the same people in the industry and were making music at the same time. And it's kind of interesting to think about. Yeah. Shall we delve into his top best albums of all time?
Let's fucking do it.
Let's okay. Top 5 this, let's say.
Yeah, the top 5. So
one day maybe we'll do an episode on the top 10 or something.
Yeah, just like as a fun little maybe we'll put that on our YouTube channel. Maybe we'll just do
there you go.
Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And our
Facebook page, and our Spotify, and our SoundCloud, and
most of all, our Apple Podcast page. No, seriously, go subscribe to our crap. We're cool, I promise.
All right. At number 5, we have The Doors, self-titled. So we talked about this briefly before we chose to do this episode, or as we were picking it, and we were both like, The Doors, number 5.
Yeah.
I now have a change of heart. I don't know if you...
Did not know. Didn't listen.
You didn't listen. Okay. No. So... Again, I think this comes down a lot to his style of writing and then also just understanding where he's coming from.
Okay.
Because I like The Doors fine. I don't think I really could like name what's on what album or anything like this. But so I put this album on. It's got like most of the big hits on it. So
does it?
Yeah, pretty good album.
Okay.
Got all the good stuff. So even if I'm just putting it on, I'm like, oh yeah, this album's pretty good. But this is what I mean when he really brings context into it.
Okay.
He basically theorized that this is sort of the perfect synthesis of everything that was happening at the 60s at that time in rock music. You have sort of like the blues, you have these like sort of psychedelic influences, you have the Baroque keyboard, organ kind of thing, you have Jim Morrison being like sexy and skeezy, you have Latin rhythms, you have jazz, and it's 1967, and I can't really think of another album that has all of that and does it so well. Because if you listen to that album again, it's like, these songs are actually really fucking good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Now, as a musician, if I'm just approaching it as like the music, I don't know if I'd put it in my top 5, 10, or 50 even.
I don't think it would hit my 50, dude.
But contextually, yeah, I can totally see what he was saying. Like they were really doing something special there, and maybe it wasn't like innovative in the sense that they were bringing something new, but the fact that they could combine all this together.
That's an interesting perspective.
Like Light My Fire, for instance.
Yeah, I knew that was going to come up.
That's
somehow.
a cool song.
Yeah.
Well, it starts with that whole like Baroque intro. Yeah, okay. And then it goes into like a slow blues thing.
Yeah.
And then the solo sort of like raga free jazz, Coltrane kind of free jazz shit.
And it's, I will say it's a fairly cohesive song.
It is, I think so.
I don't think it, I still don't like the intro figure on it. I don't
think it's that great either, but like.
I think it's also like, I don't want to say out of place because it still works. It's just like, it's a little too harmonically complex probably. And the lines are a little too, like, again, I guess like Baroque-esque. You know what I mean?
That's why I think it's more for an effect.
Yeah, and I get that.
Yeah, they're not going for like, oh, this is what Bach would
Yeah,
play.
of course, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, I just don't think it works that well. But it's also definitely not bad. It's listenable. I'm like, that's cool.
Well, that's okay. This is where it comes down to. It's like you play keys.
Yeah.
You know a lot about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You hear that, and you're like, meh.
Yeah.
But he's listening to this, and he's like, man, he's taking this figure thing here, and it goes into this blues thing, and
I guess I get that, but like I guess as my perspective entails, I value it a little less than he does.
That's fine.
And I actually appreciate that he values that because it's. I mean, in that sense, it's pretty cool. I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah, no. I was listening to the album, I was reading his like review on it, and yeah, it's not necessarily stuff I missed. It's something I just didn't really think about enough.
Yeah,
when I was listening to it because I listened to the Doors, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's old '60s rock shit, and it's good, but whatever. But again, contextually.
It's pretty cool.
Pretty cool album, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
I might give it a re-listen.
Give it a re-listen.
Again, I'm being influenced by a weird, creepy Italian man.
Exactly.
Like
he did it to me. He did it.
He's like 65 or whatever. Yeah. So I'm saying he's a pretty important figure in like music criticism.
I think so too.
I know who the fuck he is, dude.
And what's interesting too, because in the top 5, that's perhaps the only mainstream band, arguably.
Arguably, yeah. The case can be made for number 4.
Number 4, Velvet Underground, their first album, Velvet Underground and Nico.
Yeah.
They are obviously well known enough. They were not that successful during their time.
That's probably true, yeah.
Yes. I have a lot to say about this band and this album. It's one of my favorite albums of all time.
Yeah, we've officially moved on to number 4, by the way. Yeah.
And to me, this sort of like captures the Scaruffi perspective. It's like, okay, it's like a weird rock album. It happened in the 60s. There was rock and blues and stuff, but also there was some like modern classical influences. Andy Warhol was involved. Like, I think these are the pieces that make up the high scores of Scaruffi's perspective.
Yeah, it's he really does enjoy like combination of different elements and also like I guess a little bit of frontier pushing and again in context of what's happening around him. So that really ranks into his perspective quite a bit. And I think the Velvet Underground to me is a better example than the Doors. Hence why it's rated higher.
Hey, weird.
But yeah, so I love this album.
Yeah, it's like, again, one of my favorite albums of all time. One of my favorite bands of all time. It is one of the most influential albums. Like I have this theory. It was like, all these bands either listen to the Velvet Underground or the Beatles. Yeah. And you can like, maybe not anymore. But at least back like 20 years ago, you could trace that back to one of those two bands. Number 3, we have Faust. They're Faust 1.
Faust 1.
Did you listen at all?
I have listened. I didn't re-listen.
I did not re-listen to this one either.
Yeah, I mean, I like it. Yeah. I honestly like the Velvet Underground much more.
I do too.
But like, it's just different.
I didn't read his review on this one, so.
Me neither. Don't have too much to say.
Move on to that one then.
Yeah.
2, Robert Wyatt, Rock Bottom.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Up till this point, like, all of these albums have been released with like in a 3 to 4 year period. And this one's like another 4 or 5 years later. Actually,
yeah. If we go
all these albums are 67 to like 74.
Yes.
So that's something interesting to point out.
Well, that's the history of rock.
Yeah.
That's where the most, like, that's
where the most,
that's
where like the big explosion kind of happens. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you look at the top 10, it still kind of falls into that.
Yeah. I think the biggest jump on there is 78 with an album I've never listened to in my life.
Oh, then on top 10, there's like a 98.
1970, 73, 1990. Is that the one? Yeah, that's none. Yeah.
And 98. Unless you're looking at a different top 10 than me.
I think I'm looking at a top
weird.
different top 10. What?
That's weird. All right,
Okay, so
anyway.
his website is not that simple. Hold on, I have to look over here real fast. What? Where are we looking, dude? Oh, you're talking about the CD release?
Dude, it is a different one.
It is? It looks the same.
It does. What the fuck? Oh my god. That's so weird.
That's really funny. Okay.
Okay, anyway.
Piero
Doesn't matter.
Scaruffi's website sucks. Never mind. We lied.
Doesn't matter. Okay, anyway. But anyway, Robert Wyatt, I listened to this again. I read the review. Not someone I'm a huge fan of. I get what he was saying. It's interesting. I feel like he puts a little more... he has a little bit of a bias towards European bands.
Yes. I mean, again, so every critic has a perspective they come from.
Well,
This
according
man-
to his
here we
post, this is an unbiased blog.
Of course, completely unbiased. Anyone who says they're unbiased is fucking stupid. It's really funny how this turns out. But yeah, so this is a man from Europe who spent a lot of his life in Europe, and he likes Europe bands. Nothing wrong with that.
No.
Nothing
And
at all.
It is a good album.
Yes.
I think the Velvet Underground one is much better.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I would probably put that album at the top of this list that I see in front of me. Velvet Underground. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll get
Okay.
there. Well, I don't want to talk about that one yet. But like the Robert Wyatt one, I do like that album quite a bit. I don't think it's quite as captivating as either of the previous two.
I agree. Again, I think the context thing, this is like the whole like Canterbury scene, and this is sort of the penultimate version of that.
Yeah,
and
it's its final form.
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, I get it. And then that's what I'm saying. It's like,
And that's what we always say. Even if we like disagree with his opinions, we understand why he's coming to them.
also, it's less black influenced.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah.
Speaking of black influenced, or lack thereof.
Oh no! Is this number one the whitest?
Well,
No. Yeah. Well.
there's a lot to say about this. Okay, number one. Okay. So,
We're fucking hooking you in. The anticipation is probably fucking killing you right now.
I tried to do some research on this,
All right,
and
yeah.
I'm not entirely sure if this is true, but from what I can find and what I remember, I think part of the reason Scaruffi got his fame is through 4chan's music board.
I think so.
I think so, or like his mainstream kind of fame. Like,
Yeah.
I think without that, he would just be some weirdo.
We'd never know about him.
Yeah. I mean, I guess he's still a weirdo that just writes his weird music blog.
Yeah.
But I think the reason people know about him and people actually are listening to what he says is through 4chan's music board. Now, I think it was started with the Beatles thing, and we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
But probably his most famous opinion, besides his opinion on the Beatles, is that the best rock album of all time,
All time. Keep for all time.
for all time, the one of like three that has a 9 out of 10, is Trout Mask Replica by Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band.
Okay. Let's just start out. I do like this album.
Yes.
Yeah. If any of your listeners want to just like, maybe we'll even like edit in a little clip of the first track. Who knows? But like,
Now I could do the instrumental version that was on Spotify. That I
oh,
listened to
that's
last
right.
week.
That's right. So
I found out why too, because I tried to listen to this on Spotify today, and it's not on Spotify. All their other albums are on Spotify, but Trout Mask is not. But the instrumental version of Frownland is.
okay. So yeah, we might edit in the clip from Frownland. If so, we'll do it right here. No. It's fucking weird. It's like kind of bad, but it's also really awesome. I don't know how to dissect this without doing another 30 minutes on
I was
it.
gonna say we should probably have an episode about this album at some point.
Yeah.
But essentially, the story. I don't know if you all know, but I studied with the guitar player on this album.
What was this guitar player's name?
That was Mr. Zoot Horn Rollo.
Mr. Zoot Horn Rollo.
Bill Harkleroad was his name. Studied with him for like 3 years in high school. And he wouldn't actually talk about this album at all because he was so traumatized by it. But he actually has like a sort of like biography, autobiography with the writer of The Simpsons.
Yep.
Of all people, that he let me borrow and read. And essentially, okay, putting aside all the like relevance of this album or what Scaruffi thinks or what it went on to be, essentially the recording process for this, or the songwriting process for this, was they all went to a cabin in the woods for a year. He fed them a bunch of drugs. They were not allowed to see anyone. They would practice like 10, 12 hours a day. And the songwriting process was Captain Beefheart would go to a piano and just bang out shit. Couldn't play at all.
No.
Bang out shit. Yeah. I believe the drummer had to record it and transcribe it for the band. And they practiced this, like I said, for like a year. And then they went, Frank Zappa recorded them.
Yep.
And they sat down and they just recorded it straight through.
Yeah,
And
this is not a short album.
No, 80 minutes.
This gets up to 120, right?
Yeah.
Easy.
Yeah, and they just did it straight through, like no problem, because they were that tight.
Yeah.
Which is insane. If you listen to this album, there's like, it's hard to tell that there's actually something concrete going on. It's
like, there's a lot of like, if you want to analyze it in depth, there's a lot of like polymetric stuff. There's a lot of, I would say, like rhythmic cell orientation, like where things don't line up with each other, but they come back at a certain point. There's a lot of really complicated figures happening, and Captain Beefheart doesn't know any of this shit.
No.
He bangs shit out on a piano via like divine intervention or like stupid idiocy or just drugs, perhaps? Drugs?
I don't know. I don't know. It's hard to. Again, it's not the time.
And again, it is brief mention time. My favorite things on this album are the solo Captain Beefheart tracks and Frownland, which is the first track. But I really love his solo blues singing on this album. And actually, my favorite Captain Beefheart album is his first one. That makes me kind of a lame ass, I know. But like, I find his delivery very captivating.
Yes.
Very well thought out, and that's why I can almost believe him when he writes the rest of this album, you know?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, he had something.
Like,
I don't think he was really responsible for the music much at all. I don't know what those original piano parts were like.
Dude,
again, there's no actual piano on the album either. Like,
it's like a fucking trio, right?
That's two guitars.
Okay.
Drums, bass, and he also played clarinet, if I recall, and saxophone, sometimes at the same time.
It's like the best disaster that's ever happened.
Yes. So coming back to Scaruffi,
why do we keep talking about this album? Fuck, it's my fault.
Yeah. Okay. So I had not actually read his review ever until doing this episode.
Yeah.
And to me, this is actually obviously is an album that like kind of means something to me because this was like one of my mentors, and he's like. This is like the thing he's most famous for, and so
the thing he's most traumatized by.
Yeah, and it's just something I picked up in high school and listened to, and was like, "This is fucking crap. I hate this." And as I got more into free jazz and avant-garde shit and stuff like that, it made more sense. Comparing it to something like Ornette Coleman or Mingus, I don't think it's that good in the sense of coming from the sort of. So this is where the Scaruffi thing is weird. Okay, if I compare this album, which was 1969, to what like Coltrane or Mingus or Coleman had been doing, I don't find it that interesting.
In a sense, I guess I agree. I would find it more interesting based on the sounds he's using.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. But here's where I think it differs because it's a rock blues band doing it, and I think this is kind of where it's special. So to me, that's always been like something I've been really interested in because I was a guitar player who likes weird shit. It's like, here's something I can like grab onto, whereas like, Coltrane never used guitar or anything like that. Right. Yeah. So to me, that's where it kind of sat with me. Like really cool avant blues rock thing.
Yeah.
And like as someone who was listening to Led Zeppelin, this kind of blew my mind after a while. Now reading his review of this, it actually makes a lot more sense why he put this as the number one.
Okay, I don't know. Why don't you enlighten me?
Okay, so first of all, I think this is like the most in-depth review he does of anything. It's
definitely the longest.
I think so. And he still doesn't touch on he might actually touch on almost every track. I'm not sure. Some of the like solo vocal ones, I don't think he really goes into, but he does talk about most of it. From his perspective, though, well, first of all, it's so far ahead of any other rock band had done at that point.
Yeah, this is the
even
most...
Zappa was not anywhere near
in the late 60s. Fuck no, dude.
No.
Like,
this is
when was like Hot Rats, like 74?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, even early Zappa, where they had some of the sort of like freak out shit.
Yeah,
like,
not even fucking close. And 74 Hot Rats is still not as weird as this.
It's not. There's
not even close.
Barely anything to grab onto this album. There's like one or two tracks that are kind of normal-ish, like China Pig.
Yeah,
it's
I mean,
like
but even China,
ish,
it's listenable.
It's listenable.
For like a person that's not weird like us.
Yes. So getting that out of the way, that like literally no one had ever done this in rock and wouldn't for quite a while.
Right.
Oh, I forgot the Beatles did Revolution number 9. That's really good, right?
Yeah, fantastic. Okay.
Anyway,
thanks for that.
I forget the exact phrasing he uses, but he's like, this is white blues taken to its furthest point. Like, you cannot take it past this. And I think that's perhaps the genius of Mr. Beefheart himself, is that, okay, all this music is crazy, and that's awesome, but the fact that he is essentially just singing, like, blues on top of this.
Yes.
And it's so demented and so, like, entwined with the blues, but removed at the same time. I do see this as, like, sort of the farthest point that music could possibly go.
Yeah, it's... I mean, then again... You never know what can be possible until it gets, broken. But
well, that's the
it's
thing, but
really
yeah.
hard to imagine a
Yes.
world where Captain Beefheart's Trout Mask Replica is not the farthest you can push a white person in.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even mean it like white versus
I know,
black.
I know,
It's
yeah,
just
yeah.
sort of like, taking the blues form and turning it into this rock. Like Safe as Milk, like you said. It's like that was sort of a step of like, okay, this is blues,
And
but
that album has some weird stuff too.
Yeah,
but it's very much a straightforward album.
yes, this is just...
I also believe it's not 80 minutes.
To imagine, though, that that came out before this.
Yeah, I know. I know, dude.
But it's so chaotic and everything is at its breaking point, but it still has some of those things you can catch onto, like those rhythmic cells.
Totally,
and
yeah.
like his vocals, and
This is not noise.
it's not noise.
There are musical ideas
Mm-hmm.
somewhere. They're harder to find. They're fewer and far between, perhaps.
Yes.
They're more diverse. So I guess in a sense, this is probably the singular most interesting album in this top 5.
I think so.
But it's fucking bizarre. And I can't even really disagree with it being number 1 because I haven't put enough thought into like this kind of ranking system before. So.
Right. I mean, this is just me trying to get his perspective. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is the number 1 rock album of all time. I again wouldn't even classify it as rock, probably.
Yeah. But I get why he says it.
I get why he says that. And I think really at the end of the day with Scaruffi, like any other music critic probably couldn't convince me that this was the best rock album of all time, but he can write about it and be like, you know what? That makes sense.
I'm gonna point out that this review is like 17 to 18 paragraphs, and I have like in my life never read any music thing that long.
Yeah, that's true.
And I read at least a lot of it. I don't think I actually got through it, but I mean it's compelling reading for anyone who's actually interested in music in a lot of different ways. Because
and again, he doesn't actually talk about music that much. Like,
And as much as I'd like him to, I'd rather he didn't actually. Because
I mean, like, how would you even do it with this?
with this, I have no fucking clue. I think what we said is like it.
Yeah.
I guess I could give a transcription and analysis, but I'd actually rather be dead.
Yeah.
So
Fair.
he goes about all this. He makes compelling arguments musically, but without referencing any specific music artifacts or ideas. Any harmony analysis.
Yeah.
So it's just really interesting. He's an interesting dude.
He's a very interesting dude.
And yeah, again, Trout Mask Replica, number 1.
All right, let's get into the bad stuff.
Baby.
So
This is what you all been waiting for.
as we mentioned before, he's a really weird man. One thing that I'm going to have to bring up, just because I don't want people to think that we support him, because I don't as a person support him. So I wasn't actually able to find this on his site.
You weren't what? You what?
I found it through other things.
How about that? Why wouldn't he put this on his site?
Well, I think it is on his site, though, is the thing.
Oh.
I think it is.
That's not good.
He might be a pedophile.
Moment of silence.
So, from what I can tell, this is the only thing he actually wrote about it. And to make it even better, it was in an article about why he opposed gay marriage.
Oh, God.
And he goes, why are there age limits? Why is it illegal to marry a 12-year-old? Helen of Troy was 12. Juliet and Cleopatra were still teenagers when they became famous. Most heroines of classic novels and poems were underage by today's laws. Thomas Edison married a 16-year-old. Medical studies show that the best age for a woman to have a children is between 15 and 25. Lowest chance of miscarriage, of birth defects, and last but not least, of the woman dying while giving birth. While the worst age is after the mid-30s. And the younger you are, the more likely you are to cement a real friendship with your children. The older you are, the more likely that the generation gap will hurt your children's psychology. Therefore, it is much more natural to have a child at 16 than at 40. In countless countries of the world, women have their first child at a very young age and stop having children at a relatively young age. Nevertheless, in the USA, it is illegal to have sex before 18. But, note, only if the partner is over 18, which is like saying that it's okay to rob a bank if you're a banker?
Can we talk, can we talk about that analogy?
Okay. No, I'm just going to stop reading there. I'm done. I'm done.
Can we just take a brief moment for that analogy that makes no fucking sense? Okay, so we were just fucking, in love with Scaruffi like this whole episode. And like we were talking about his big brain and shit. When he writes shit like this, I'm convinced his brain is really tiny. So I want to talk specifically about the part where he mentions like Cleopatra, and for their time they were famous, blah 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 blah. Does it fucking matter? The morality of their time is different than the morality of our time. It doesn't, these things don't translate 200 years or 2,000 years.
They do not.
So, and that's from someone who's an academic who's studied a lot of different fields. Someone like this should not make that kind of mistake. But that is even worse for him because that means he is a bad person.
Yeah, he knows.
He knows exactly what he's doing, and he's trying to convince you. He's trying to persuade you, where I feel like in his actual criticism, he's not trying to persuade me that this band is, Captain Beefheart's the #1 rock album of the time. He's literally just listing why.
Exactly.
But this is a persuasive argument about having sex with children, and that is fucked up. Like, it's even more like, this is probably a weird statement, but it's like more fucked up than a stupid person saying it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It's fucked up, but I'm right.
You see the context. If we're going to review this on the context.
Okay, let's review this article. Yeah, so.
Let's please
no.
not.
So basically, long story short, Piero Scaruffi, smart man, horrible person for trying to basically mislead you about the morality of having sex with children, which in our time is pretty much a bad thing.
It is indeed. So there's that. There's also, you brought up earlier, the fact that there's very few black artists on his best of rock list.
If I were to go through the top, because I looked at the top 10, I didn't see one on there.
Oh boy. I mean, I know we have different lists, but
yeah, that's true.
Well, it is interesting.
Uh-oh.
So here's where. Here's where.
I'm like 20 down, dude.
Here's where it gets weird. So we were talking about his vision of rock is pretty broad.
Yeah.
But apparently it does not include rhythm and blues or anything like that.
Yeah. Why? Fuck that.
Which to me is bizarre. Because I wouldn't consider that rock either. But if I'm putting folk and weird jazzy rock shit into rock, then
and that's where his the way he organizes kind of falls apart is because. R&B influenced the shit out of every single album.
Everyone. Well, he'll mention that in his reviews too about these artists being blues influenced.
But he doesn't ever describe what that means ever.
No, but he'll use that as a plus too. But,
I know
it's so bizarre.
Yeah. So what can we read into Scaruffi?
Well,
yeah.
There's one thing I can kind of read into that.
Yeah, is that do you think he hates black people?
He might be racist. Here's a weird thing about him, though, too.
What up?
If you get into the 80s and 90s, he has a lot of hip-hop albums on his best of rock charts. It makes no sense.
I know.
It makes literally no sense.
I don't understand.
He's a weird fucking guy.
He's a weird guy. A weird racist pedophile guy.
So those are the real problems.
Yeah, those are the big problems. And I kind of want to have this talk at the end of the episode is this might end up being a whole episode someday, but how can you support someone's opinions who comes from this kind of context? I want to talk about that later.
Yes, we can talk about that.
But
those are okay.
Why don't we continue on?
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are the things I feel like we had to get out of the way, just so we can say we don't support this man.
Yeah. No, I think he's a shithole person.
Don't like him. His list might be good, but perhaps his most famous controversy, which in comparison is nothing.
Yeah, but, it's very light, yeah.
But the thing he's most well known for is his disdain of the Beatles.
Yeah.
Who many would consider to be the greatest rock band of all time. Mm-hmm. Jake, your thoughts?
I haven't put nearly enough thought into who is the single best rock band of all time.
I just mean about the Beatles.
Oh, about the Beatles, I fucking love the Beatles, dude.
About his opinion on the
Oh
Beatles.
God, I think his opinion is fucking insane, and especially for especially the things.
Yes.
So we mentioned, let's talk about the Doors review. The Doors were, in his opinion, the number 5 album in the history of rock. Sorry, implicit bias. Because they combined a lot of elements that, hadn't necessarily been previously incorporated into the, vernacular of rock at the time. The Beatles had been doing that for 6 years by the time this album came out. And like, in a lot of cases better, in my opinion. Like, one of my favorite Beatles tracks is With Indian Without You, right? Incorporates a lot of Indian influences. They've been doing Indian stuff earlier than that, too. And the Beatles pushed the envelope in so many cool ways that I just cannot fathom how he has this sort of... It's like anti-selling, anti-commercial...
Yes. We got to come with him. We got to view this as a context-based argument. But even then, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's almost like he listened to their first couple albums and then
if
stopped.
that were the case, I would totally get it.
Exactly.
Because I'm not a huge fan of the couple first Beatles albums, like the more, like Twist and Shout kind of stuff. The more rock, straight ahead,
I don't like that
British.
shit either. I don't like that either. And he brings up valid points about that, which I agree with. Doesn't really. I mean, I feel like when people talk about the Beatles, they don't necessarily talk about that stuff so much. Like, it's part of it, but
no one I know talks about
it's
their
not
first 2 albums.
why they're considered the best.
Yeah, like what's the most famous, most popular Beatles album? It's like Abbey Road,
Probably, or Revolver, or something like that. Yeah, one of those.
Like the mid period.
Yeah, mid-late period.
Mid-late period. Yeah,
yeah.
And those albums are plenty diverse,
Right?
plenty innovative, and plenty cool.
His whole article about it, this is where I wonder too. It's like, is he crazy? Did he want to be controversial? I don't know.
I have a brief theory about it. So it's not that he wanted to do this, but it's well known that to get yourself some, I guess, mystique or some juice flowing around your conversation, right? You got to get some buzz. You take an opinion and you amplify it times a million. So my actual guess is he doesn't hate the Beatles as much as his giant million paragraph long page. Yeah, remember we talked about Captain Beefheart's album.
This is by far the longer thing.
This is way longer. I think he did that out of a desire to be controversial, which is why it comes across as forced and kind of fake, and doesn't really gel with a lot of the stuff on his website.
My opinion
Okay.
is that he, again, doesn't necessarily hate the Beatles that much. He got sick of all these other artists not being recognized.
Yeah.
And, also I do hate, this isn't so much a thing anymore, but if you went on Reddit 10 years ago and they're like, Beatles is the greatest thing ever, I was born in the wrong generation.
Yeah. That's still a thing.
Yeah. Okay, but...
I promise. I promise you, dude.
To me, it's maybe more of just a backlash against that. More of just being
reaction.
Why aren't these people getting the recognition?
Yeah, which is a fair assessment.
It is, yeah. Either way, though, he's fucking weird in this.
Yeah. This is the wrong battle.
I actually couldn't get through the whole article.
I didn't either, dude.
I got pretty far.
I think about halfway.
I will not. I do believe Sgt. Pepper's is on one of his best of the year lists. I think it's the only Beatles album on there. That or Rubber Soul, one of those two, I think.
Hopefully, it's Rubber Soul.
I'm not sure, but one of their albums. Is
okay.
On there.
Okay.
It makes no sense. He talks about their history and then just kind of bashes them the whole time, except for George Martin. He loves. I almost did.
Did you almost?
Well, he's George R. Martin, isn't he?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So okay.
Anyway. But at one point, he talks about how they're not very good musicians. Fair enough. I mean, they're not the best musicians ever. I don't think they're bad. He specifically says that George Harrison is a sub-rate guitar player, which I disagree with.
Yeah, I disagree with that.
He's not flashy.
He's not a virtuoso, but
he says Paul is, I can't remember. He's kind of shit talks his bass, and then he's like, "Well, he was very innovative in the Mercy beat sound, though." And it's like, well, which is it? And then he goes Ringo, who might be the most talented of the four.
Which is, by the way, if you couldn't tell, not ironic. He says this in those paragraphs flat out as a statement of fact. I'm not going to jump on the Ringo hate train anytime soon. I think he serves just fine. He is by far the least talented member.
They had him sit out of the first couple of recordings because he couldn't keep the fucking beat. Yeah. And then he got in some of those recordings, he still couldn't beat the beat.
Yeah, I mean, there's Ringo flubs all up and down a couple albums, dude. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't
matter, but to say he was the most talented musician in the Beatles is fucking crazy.
It's like a joke, kind of insulting.
This whole article just doesn't make any sense, whether it's your theory or mine. It just like so bizarre.
Yeah, especially coming from his other very well thought out points.
Yeah. Like, I think perhaps the overall theme he's getting at is that it's Beatlemania. That was a pushed, created thing. And that's the reason they were so successful. And that's part of it. And that is something that obviously became a standard for pop music up until now,
you mean the Beatles innovated something?
Oh
my God.
What? And but had he come out and just been like, so all this shit, like, they ended up doing this because blah, 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 knew this guy, and they pushed this way and all this crap. And yeah, probably. But then to turn around and be like, also, they suck. That is...
It doesn't gel. It's not cohesive. It's just... And when you see, like, a contradiction like that, like, your brain immediately wants to, like, just explain why. And the first thing that popped into my mind is that this Beatles opinion and his weird child shit like connected.
What?
I know. Just hear me out. So they're not connected literally, but they come from the same place of like dissonance.
Okay.
So basically, they both come from the spot of like, he has this like a slight inkling of opinion that he can't really represent that well, and he's passionate about both. Which is, I know, I feel like gross even talking about this. Like, see the look he's giving me over here. I know, but like, they come from the same like place in his mind of cognitive dissonance.
Okay,
and that's all. I'm not a psychologist. I can't really read too far into that.
Well,
but that's what came to my mind. I'm like, this sounds like the same way he's arguing.
You're right. What you're saying, what I got out of reading a bunch about his stuff, especially his like autobiography blurb or whatever, like, there's obviously something off about this man. And that might also be part of what makes him like so smart. I don't know if it's autism, Asperger's, something like that, something deeper. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be like obsessive compulsive. Who knows?
We don't know.
There's something not 100% normal functioning, I would say.
There is not. And then it's that whole, here we go into it. But these like geniuses who also have like so much dysfunction in their lives.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think he's a genius necessarily, but like by far the best rock critic.
Is there actually another rock critic?
Probably not.
Yeah.
But
that I don't want to kill myself listening to or reading.
I mean, so in any case, whether this was his weird cognitive dissonance or wherever he was trying to be edgy, this is what made him popular. So
yeah, the Beatles, not the
well, that came later.
Well, it depends on what you mean by popularity at that point. Yeah.
Anyway, so kind of touched this earlier, but yes, that we opened the episode with the first paragraph of his Beatles review, and that became a copy pasta on 4chan's music site.
Yep.
Years ago, and it still is referenced today. So we're going to talk about 4chan right now.
We're going in there, huh? So
I used to go back on the music board back in the day.
Yeah, back in the dark ages of Matt's life.
That was dark. This is also when I was on this website listening to music.
Yeah. When was that exactly? 2010 through 12?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
He was a young man.
I was
Didn't know
man.
better.
Mm-hmm. No, I found a lot of great music doing this.
Yeah.
From what I get, though, there was sort of... The music board originally maybe started out more as a kind of edgy underground group, people who are like, hey, this is music that doesn't get talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's probably more of like the needle drop crowd, like indie music, pitchfork kind of shit.
Which is, in my most humble opinion, the kill myself crowd.
Yes. I think Scaruffi landed straight in the middle of that. I think he came at a time when the board was getting away from its more like experimental underground stuff into more mainstream stuff. And someone dropped that copy pasta onto the site. which kind of brought people into Scaruffi's website, and then like Trout Mask became a meme. Death Grips was probably the first one. I think that's what kind of bridged the gap there, was because Death Grips was sort of the pitchfork
Right.
kind of darling band, and also Scaruffi liked them, and so that sort of became like the music culture of the board for a while.
yeah.
You know, I don't really know what it's like today. I haven't been on that board in a long time, but I remember back in 2012 or whatever, like he was a big deal. People people talked about him a lot. People like he would release a new rating. People would have discussions about it. I think he really found his popularity on 4chan,
Probably, yeah.
which is bizarre.
I mean,
not really.
Yeah,
though.
I was gonna say, does that really surprise you? Because
No,
in both a good and a bad way.
Yes.
Because like you were saying, 4chan or the music board started out as this kind of underground. Here's things that's not talked about a lot, and that's kind of you can kind of see that a lot in Piero Scaruffi's writings as well.
Exactly.
He wants to bring light to that kind of thing. So I think in that sense it makes sense, and that's a good thing. And also because the fact that he wants to have sex with underage children, that you also makes sense in part of 4chan culture.
Yes.
So I think that's it in a nutshell. Also, I wish I'd done a little more research on this, but according to the dates here, this does predate 4chan by 5 years.
Which does?
The Scaruffi website.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Yeah.
I just wanted to point that.
Well, that's what I wanted too. It's like I found out about him through 4chan. You found out about him through me.
Yes.
How else do people know about him? I don't know.
Well, that's another question: is how much do people actually know about him?
Well,
I would.
according to him, he gets quite a lot of hits a year. I don't know.
So,
but again, he did have a New York Times feature.
Right. But at the beginning of this episode, you used the word mainstream for Pierro. I would not really agree with that. I don't actually know. But I mean, I've never seen any band ever talk about their review of him by him on his website.
I mean, would you?
And that's kind of what I'm saying, dude. That's kind of my point.
I mean, actually, I looked this up earlier and pulled it up to his yearly ratings. So every year he does this. So I looked at what his ones were for last year, 2019.
Yeah, that's where I found one of the albums I mentioned
there
on
you
the
go.
show.
Yeah. So I was going to say, you talked about that. But I was just looking at he's got like 14 albums on the rock list rated right now. I know one of these people. Two. I know two of these people.
I know one. Yeah, I know one.
Right, and I know we're not the most in touch, but like, I mean, I haven't even heard these names or anything,
And I mean, we come from a different perspective. It's our circle of contacts or whatever may not be sort of on this level.
Well, I guess that's what I'm saying. I wonder too. It's like, are these people that other people are talking about? Or is this like his whole quest of just spending money on random shit?
That would be my guess.
I also want to know like how he decides what to listen to. Does he just like search it out?
Just looks at how cool the album art is.
You know what?
I mean, have you seen some of these dope album artworks, dude? Are you serious? God. No, but
yeah, that's why he likes fucking Trout Mask so much, because that album art is really good.
I like it. Whatever. Yeah, it sucks. Whatever. Doesn't matter. The point is, yeah, it's weird. The choices he puts up, how he finds people, I'd be really interested to know.
Me too.
Because we're in an age where there's so much of everything that, I mean, you can go on Bandcamp and under the most specific niche subgenre imaginable, you can find 150,000 albums or whatever, right?
Actually, I think it was like 2 years ago or something. So it was like best album of 2018 or whatever. I was like, let's check it out because I haven't listened to like modern music in a while. And it was only available on Bandcamp.
Yeah, he has several of 20.
Right. So it's like, how?
Yeah. And how
did someone sending it to him or like?
There is a submissions.
Is there?
Yeah, email. It's like for submissions, email. He changes the email address too. That's what's funny. No, he does that. He does that for a reason to avoid like spam because there are bots that go through websites with a bunch of hits and send you spam emails. But he might also change it just so he doesn't get that many submissions.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So anyway,
so in conclusion, if you want to find some new, really interesting music, there's a great database online, Scaruffi.com. You will find something you like, I guarantee. You'll have to dig.
Yeah. But that's what happens when you start really getting into music. You actually have to start doing work.
Exactly.
And like, I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, but when you really start digging, you're going to find stuff you don't like more often. And you're going to find stuff that you couldn't imagine have existed.
Yeah. And I will say with him, I'm more off to find the good stuff that I didn't know that existed.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of good albums on this.
Oh
website.
yeah, dude. So many. Like it's actually like rare that I find an album I don't like that he recommends.
I don't think I have yet, and I don't think I've gone through as hard as you have. But
yeah, there's been a couple, but most of the time I'm like, this at least is really interesting to listen to.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, at the very least, you're not bored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Worth checking out.
Yeah, go to Scaruffi.com.
Don't read anything else he's ever written.
Never, ever. Please don't. And again, do not mistake our love of his database or his reviews for supporting his other worldly views. He's a bad person. We know that. And I would like to segue neatly into my rant, if that's okay with you.
Please do.
My rant is about a guy named Piero Scaruffi. Basically, I wanted to talk about, I mentioned this like 20 minutes ago, or however the fucking long we've been doing this episode. At what point do you say like no to someone's input creatively? And this will depend per person, obviously. I might be a bad person. It takes a lot to make me not want to listen to someone's music. Like, I actually can't think of a single person. Like, for instance, I still like R. Kelly's music. I love his singing, and I even like Trapped in the Closet.
We know you've mentioned that before.
I know we have.
No, we have not. You have.
Oh. Hey, Terry agreed with me. Shout outs to Terry Monstrosity. Episode 7.
Yeah, just released a new album. Check it out.
Yeah, it's sick. Anyway. Yeah, so I like R. Kelly. The dude is a bad person. Did he just he went to jail, right? Like, officially.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Great. But, like, I still listen to his music. You know, people still watch Roman Polanski's films. Mm-hmm. So I guess at what point do you start separating art from the artist, I guess is the phrase.
I think that's a big debate.
Yeah.
And that's something that's more relevant today than it ever has been.
Definitely.
I think it's interesting. I think those standards aren't really held to a lot of people in the past.
Honestly, maybe for a good reason, like we were mentioning earlier, like moralities of the past versus moralities of today are different.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure, like, you know, Shakespeare probably did some shitty stuff. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
dude.
even someone like John Lennon, for instance, you know,
Yeah.
all accounts a pretty shitty human being.
Yeah. Asshole.
You know, beat his wife, abandoned his kid, did a whole like protest by laying in a hotel bed. Bad person all around.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
But, you know, people obviously still love the Beatles.
Yeah, and they like his solo stuff too. Yeah.
It's interesting. We're definitely in this sort of like cancel culture period right now.
Yeah.
Which can be good or bad. I don't know. We're in a time now where people, like, their thoughts are more available to everybody else.
Yeah.
And, you know, maybe John Lennon beating his wife wasn't really well known back in the day.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't heavily publicized.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting, though, that we give it a pass.
But who knows how long that'll hold up?
Yeah, I don't know.
I honestly think it'll hold up forever. I don't think John Lennon's music is going to go away.
I don't think so either.
As much as I want Imagine to never happen again.
I think the artist and the art should be separated.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, though, they inform each other, so that's also kind of hard.
It's so complicated. That's why Scaruffi is so interesting.
Yeah.
It's because, like, he is a fucking asshole, racist, pervert.
Yeah,
pervert,
pedophile. I think we can like straight up say pedophile.
Straight up say it. Okay.
I mean, but then Jimmy Page like kidnapped that 14-year-old girl and kept her in his like house for years.
R. Kelly beat on a 15-year-old girl. Maybe what we should really be talking about is how we could change the fucking music industry.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, so there are bad people in the history of all kinds of art.
Yeah.
And like possibly like more like per capita, there are more like bad people artists than there are like
I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
it
like,
seems that way.
You can probably get that in any sort of like field or anything.
That's true.
Perhaps one day we should do an episode on that. It's
might want to bring an actual like philosopher because we're actually stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably just at the end of the day, like it's probably a decision everyone has to sort of make for themselves.
Yeah.
And if like you're offended by the person so much you don't want to like listen to their art, I think that's totally valid.
Sure.
And if you don't if you think it stands on its own, fine too.
Yep. And I definitely fall into the latter camp. Again, it will take I can't think of an example of an artist I won't listen to or read or whatever. Besides, I haven't, like, maybe like Mein Kampf. I haven't read Mein Kampf. I don't plan to. You know what I mean?
I don't know. Did Hitler ever pee on some kids?
Good fucking point, dude. I don't know. Probably. I don't know. Who the fuck knows?
I'm not trying to compare Hitler to R. Kelly.
To Scaruffi. So, wait, Scaruffi was from Italy. Italy under Mussolini. Okay, we're done. Yeah, do you have any rants?
No, not after that. I don't.
Thank God.
I'm good, I think.
Okay, that concludes our Piero Scaruffi episode. What is our listening of the week, Matt?
Well, as I was researching his top 10 albums, I had heard all of them except one.
Which one?
That would be Twin Infinitives by Royal Trux. I put that on. That was really cool, I thought. I don't know anything about them. I meant to research them a little before we did this episode. I didn't. It's from 1994. It's very weird. It's like noise sample rock. Like, I put it on, almost thought it was like sort of industrial.
What year, sorry? 94?
94. I thought it was like industrial rock when I put it on. And then sometimes it'd just be sort of like indie rock. And then the next track would be like weird bleepy shit. It's very strange. I'm going to have to research them more. They also did this weird thing where there's a lot of like pauses in the songs.
Like Pro Tools kind of pauses, or like
I feel like they're more natural.
More natural, okay.
I'm not sure though. Again, I've only listened to this like twice now. It's just like it's like they're intentionally making use of that space, but like complete space, which is kind of odd for this kind of music.
It is, yeah.
So yeah, I'm going to research them more, but I thought that album was really cool. Yeah. I would recommend it.
What was it again?
That would be Royal Trux's album Twin Infinitives.
Trux with an X, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, go check that out. I have been listening to, I revisited my absolute favorite prog band of all time,
Gentle Giant.
Gentle Giant. I love Gentle Giant so much.
Loser.
Fuck you. Yeah. I didn't actually like them at first. It took a while for me.
They have their mood, I guess.
That is it. I was in a Gentle Giant mood. And as far as like prog rock bands go, they do not sound like anyone else.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely not. They have very insane vocal passages, very contrapuntal. They have some like medieval influences on a couple albums. They do all that shit. If I had to recommend one album, I would say The Power and the Glory, which is closer to a more stereotypical prog rock than their other stuff, but like that album's weird as shit, dude.
Let's see what Scaruffi has to say about them.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. I should have looked up their reviews.
Probably not. I'm sure it's weird.
Yeah, but like the point is, I was listening to a couple of their albums, The Power and the Glory and Octopus. Very contrasting albums. Octopus is both more straightforward and more medieval in nature, in influence rather, and then Power and the Glory is just a fucking weird album with some kind of normal tracks in there.
Interestingly enough, they both got a 6.5 out of 10.
Both of those albums?
Yep.
Okay.
Which are almost the highest rated.
Of what?
Of
their albums?
Gentle Giant, yeah.
Okay.
His highest rateds were Three Friends and In a Glass House.
Okay. I don't like In a Glass House that much, but...
Well, you're wrong, because Scaruffi said it was 7 out of 10.
That's true. But the point is, they're my favorite prog band ever. They're fucking weird. Go check them out. Gentle Giant, Octopus, Power and the Glory. And with that, I think we are done with our first straight-up biography episode on a pedophile and a racist.
Yeah, I don't really feel good right now. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
There's always one answer. Cheers, my dude. Sponsor, please. This music sucks and I want to die.
Kill me now.
Yeah, I'm Jake.
Yeah.